My name's Larry Brambrut, and as she said, I have a mobile app company. I also do training development, and I started out learning, got interested in this last May, and about 2 weeks ago, finally got, after going through a bunch of rigmarole with the government, got authorized to fly commercially. So I'm pretty excited about that. So it's been a pretty crazy 2 weeks. But and I'm pretty good with puns, so that's why that says that. But I'll try and be succinct and just get through the materials, and then try and answer as many questions as we can. I also have a simulator, so this thing won't fly in here. Well, I mean, I can make it, but it's not going to be flying in here. But I have a simulator on here which we can play with at the end of the session, and I can show you how to do the controls. And we can go around here. We can fly the simulator a little bit and see how it works with the iPad and everything. So we'll do that. Quick story though. I was probably a month into flying. I was flying up near one of the lakes up where I live, up in Cumming, Georgia, and I was it was an evening, and it was a Friday night, and there was it was really nice. Remember some of the shots that you saw earlier, called Little Ridge Park, is where I was at that time, and I probably had 10 flights in or something like that. So I took off. I flew out over this part of the lake a little bit, came back, landed, and I decided I was going to go up again, just try it again. And I think I did. I took off. I was just kind of hovering there, and at the corner of my eye, I saw somebody kind of walking around me, and there was a woman, a young lady dressed in her wedding gown, and a photographer and the lady's mother. And of course, I'm flying, and so I'm trying to pay attention to the aircraft and everything. But they're like kind of walking around somewhere, and they're taking the night before their wedding pictures, right, on the lake with the sunset and things like that. And so they're off to the side here, and they're doing their thing, right? And then next thing I know, the mother's walking not directly in front of the aircraft, but not too far away from it. And she walks over down by and I was kind of heading down that way, and she walks over by the water. And the next thing I know, the bride and the photographer are all moving in my direction, right? They didn't say anything to me. They didn't say, the fellows are flying around, and and they're kind of, so basically they kind of like almost walked in front of me. I said, "Hold on a minute. I guess you want to get down by the water," and they said, "Yeah, we do." So okay, well, let me get out of your way, right? So got a little flustered, and I kind of trying to back the aircraft away and land it. And as I backed it away, I didn't even hit a tree or anything, but I hit the low-hanging leaves on the tree, and I got all kind of tangled up in the props, and it fell probably 3 feet. I was probably 3 feet off the ground. It just fell down on the ground, and I had all these little prop protectors. It broke one of the prop protectors. It didn't hurt the aircraft, right? But and then they said, "Oh, we're sorry." So like, well, you kind of just casually walked in front of a flying machine. I didn't say that exactly. I said, well, so I apologized and things like that. I said, okay, don't worry about it. And so I went back, and the whole point is I learned a very valuable lesson. One is that if you're going to be flying around in these things, especially things that are a little more sophisticated, that you need to have somebody else with you that can be what they call a VO, which is called a visual observer. And those are the people that are kind of like on your staff, that are around to watch the area, see who's around, because folks just, like you said, they just kind of walked right in front of it, right, and so it's kind of scary. So I'm very aware now of where I am when I'm flying, and as you saw, when we went out there, I have a checklist that I go through to make sure that there's no obstructions and no people around, and that are nearby and stuff like that. So it's been quite a learning curve. But now I have over 150 flights with this thing since that last May, and a cumulative distance of 40 miles, which may not seem like a lot, but it's a fair amount of flying. So it's kind of started out as a hobby. I just wanted I like technology, as Donna said, and that's how I got into most of my life. I've been in software development, technology-related things, and I just wanted to this kind of hobby kind of combines a lot of things that I like. So I like the technology. I telling a few folks I had a few flying lessons, so I like the flying thing. I like to learn more about photography. I'm not a videographer or a really good photographer yet, but I'm learning a little more all the time. I like creating movies. I like doing the post-production stuff. I work in iMovie, and I do training development, so I do a lot of things with video and audio and training materials and computer-based training and stuff like that. It's obviously, as you know, it's very creative work. So with all that combination of stuff, being able to have a aircraft you fly around and take video with it, and then do the post-production work and things like that. And there's so many applications for these things now. It's incredible what they're being used for. Everything from aerial photography to agriculture to search and rescue, inspection, surveying, 3D imaging, and of course the film industry is using them instead of helicopters now because they're cheaper, safer, and easier to manage, kind of thing. I didn't take these pictures, but this is the kind of shots. I mean, there's a website called skypixel.com. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but skypixel.com has amazing videos and amazing pictures of folks all over the world doing this thing. And I don't think it's run by or it's hosted by this company called DJI, which makes these aircraft, which is the largest manufacturer of drones in the world. And I think these came off of that site. But what I'd like to do is play you a video I did last summer. We call it recreational video. When I fly, I get permission from the local authorities to fly. I've learned that as well, to make sure it's okay to fly in these different locations. So let me play this, and it's just a 2-minute kind of a trailer thing. This is on a vacation last year to. We stopped at this bed and breakfast along the way. There wasn't much room to fly here. It was like near a street corner, but you can get the idea. And then went to Jekyll Island and Hilton Head, so I'll just let you watch. This is with this aircraft here. That's the new Westin in Jekyll Island. And this is right off the Jekyll Island Club. If you've ever been there, there's a beautiful hotel there. This is going up the inland waterway. It's kind of breezy that day as well, so you can see the gimbal kept it nice and steady. Nice and steady. And this is the Jekyll Island Club itself. I didn't want to get too close because there's some folks on the lawn in front, so I just kind of went up over the trees there. And this is their dock area. This is called Driftwood Beach in Jekyll Island. These are actually dead trees, but they decided they didn't want to call it Dead Tree Beach, so it's called Driftwood Beach. But these are actually dead trees. And that's the north end of the island. This is about 200 feet up. This is Hilton Head. Again, we're Westin fans, Westin Hotel fan. This is in the morning, actually, sunrise. That's us heading out over the Atlantic, sunrise. So that's it. So it's a lot of fun, So so that was out of about 25 or 30 minutes of video, down to 2 minutes. So as you know, it's hard to pick out what parts to leave out. But anyway, it's and if you have questions as I go along too, please ask. Please. All right. So
what are the laws about flying drones? What are the specific laws here in Georgia?
Every kind of county and park has their own rules. The FAA says you can only fly at a certain altitude for a certain where you can see the aircraft, and you can't fly within 5 miles of an airport, and you can't fly over crowds and stadiums and things like that. So, matter of fact, the website is faa.gov/UAS for unmanned aircraft systems, and it has all the rules on there about flying. But local cities and things like that can say whether you can fly there or not. Right. As a matter of fact, some of the earlier photographs I was talking about were on the lake in Lake Lanier, and I'd flown around a little bit there, and then when I realized I probably should be asking, I talked to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they said, you can't fly over Lake Lanier. And I was like, really? I said, I wasn't going to fly over the dam or anything. He said, no, the commander says you can't fly there. So, but there's no it's not written down anywhere. I looked on their website. There's no notice or anything. So, but you should probably just check with local authorities. Forsyth County, where I live, allows you to fly. And so I just either call the park department, the police department, or talk to somebody locally and ask them if it's okay, okay to fly there.
Were the people on the beach at all sensitive to you flying around?
No, I mean there was very few people there. I was high enough. I did that. What do you call it? I think it's called craning or something. So I went behind something and I pop up, behind it, and then. But I was high enough, so I mean it kind of makes a buzzing. It makes a pretty good buzzing noise, but nobody was paying attention to it, really.
Okay.
So So there's really three categories. If you talk to the FAA, there's three categories of flying. There's private, or what we call recreational flying. There's a government, like as in police departments, fire departments, things like that, search and rescue, FEMA, disaster recovery, things like that. And then there's civil use, which is basically commercial flying. And there's different rules for each one. And I was fortunate enough in the fall to sit in the Georgia House of Representatives Committee on Drone Usage and got to attend all the meetings. And so I heard a lot of things from industry and from law enforcement agencies and from cities and folks that are already flying, doing other things, with helicopters and things like that. So I learned a lot about it, and it's a huge amount of information, and there's overlapping rules and things like that. So it is kind of confusing. The FAA is supposed to come out with new rules. They didn't come out with them in October of last year. Now they're supposed to come out with them this year about the use of these things. But for private or recreational use, you can fly as long as it's okay to fly where you're in a park or something. You can only fly up to 400 feet up in the air, because the aircraft fly 500 feet and above, so they're supposed to be. And you can only fly these within where you can visually see them. You can't use binoculars or any kind of extra things. You really can't fly. You're not supposed to fly at night, and you can't fly over groups of people, like stadiums and things like that. You might have heard about the aircraft that crashed in the U.S. Open tennis tournament last year, and luckily it crashed into the chairs, but nobody was there in those chairs at the time. But you can't fly over stadiums and groups of people, and you can't fly over infrastructure like highways and things like that. It's kind of reasonable stuff. And then the government have their own kind of regulations on these things. They still have to be approved by the FAA, but they have certain things they can do in emergencies. But they still have to notify people if they're going to be flying in the area with these other aircraft in the air. And then the civic use one is really an education process from the FAA, because they came out with something called a 333 exemption to flying in the national airspace. So anything that goes an inch off the ground in the United States is considered in the national airspace, and that means that it's controlled by the FAA. And so up until now, to these things and some other remote control aircraft that were in modeling clubs, everything was everything from a small plane to a balloon or a helicopter or a jet plane or a commercial aircraft, and that's controlled by all these different regulations, as you can imagine. And so if you want to fly one of these in the air, and there can be other aircraft in the area, you have to follow certain rules, and you have to be the actual aircraft itself and the business you're in have to be exempted by the FAA. And so last August, I submitted with my lawyers this document you have to fill out and specify what you're going to be using the aircraft for, what businesses you're going to be in, what kind of training you're going to do for the operators of it, and it goes on. The list goes on and on about the stuff you have to say you're going to do to run this business, and then they either approve you or not. And so 2 weeks ago, I got approved, and basically what I said I wanted to do was I wanted to do aerial photography, videography, training of people using these aircraft, inspections, because you can use these for flying around over roofs and things. We're doing inspections, filming things, and also possibly search and rescue. It just kind of threw that in case I want to be able to help help out to find somebody, an Alzheimer's person or a child or a dog or something that they can use for covering large areas very quickly, that kind of thing. So I got approved to do that, so now I can go out and start looking for business. The one thing that you have to be when you're right now, because of the way the laws are, in order to fly these commercially, you actually have to be a pilot. You need a pilot's license. As silly as it seems, you have to be a pilot because there is no other rule right now for flying in national airspace for commercial purposes. So you either have to be a sport or recreational pilot. So right now, if I'm doing a wedding in 2 weeks, I have to have a pilot there. I have to actually hire a pilot that's trained in how these things fly. So I can be the videographer person. I can be the director, and so forth and so on. But I'm not supposed to be actually flying this, for a commercial venture, whether it's free or not. You can't even fly them at no cost without being against the FAA rules. I know the attorney I was working with was at a conference, where the head counsel of the FAA was there, and somebody asked him this question about, free flying and things like that, and the counsel for the general counsel said that, let's say you have Larry has a website, and I have a drone, and I have a small business, and I decide, it would be kind of cool to take a photo or a little video of my building that my business is in, and put it on my website, right? He said that's considered commercial use of an aircraft, and you can't do that. So that's kind of how strict they are about it. Now, I don't know who's going to know that you took the video of your small, but technically, anything that's construed as actually using an aircraft for any kind of videography or photography is against. You have to get this 333 exemption for it. And in 2014, 5 people had gotten this exemption. In 2015, up to now, 4,000 people. When I applied, only 1,500 people had gotten the exemption. Now it's about 3,000 plus people have gotten the exemption, and now they have about 14,000 people have applied for the exemption. So it's getting more and more well known. There's going to be more people saying they want to do this kind of work. But the FAA is in the process of eliminating this pilot issue because they know it's kind of silly that you have to be a pilot and go through a lot of training and costs to fly one of these. So they're going to have some kind of a certification program, some kind of a training thing. You'll get some kind of a certificate or something, and then you'll be able to fly these without having a pilot's license. But that isn't in place. It isn't in place yet. They said maybe June of this year they're going to have these rules changed, but it's having worked with the bureaucracy for about a year now, I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Sorry, but if you use it indoors, do you still have to have all
You can fly indoors anywhere with no restriction whatsoever. Yeah, there's no rules about. Except for your own safety rules, obviously, but there's no rules about flying inside. As long as you're in a building or something like that, I even talked to a friend once about, why don't we start instead of like a kids thing where you have to go in a warehouse and you have kids flying around drones and things like that. That's perfectly fine. You can do whatever you want inside. But as soon as you step outside and go up in the air, you're in the NAS, national airspace. All right, so next thing is people ask me about is the whole safety thing with flying these things. A lot of the aircraft, like this one here, is a Phantom 3. It has sensors in it. It has a map in it that tells you whether you can fly or not. I was kind of surprised we were able to do a demo outside because we're within 5 miles of a major Dobbins Air Force base is over here, and so we're within 2.5 miles of that, but it didn't register or something, so we were able to go a few feet off the ground, but we couldn't. I knew we couldn't fly here because it's too close to an airport. So we just kind of hovered a little bit and to show you how it worked. But I was in Hilton Head last year, and I took some of that video, and you see this circle here. I actually took this aircraft to the Hilton Head airport, took the props off so nobody knew I was flying. They could see I was going to be flying, and I turned it on. And sure enough, it has this big red circle which says you are in a no-fly zone. So when you're in that no-fly zone, the aircraft won't even let you turn it on. And you see a dark area in the middle, that's no flying at all. Then there's a lighter red area where you're allowed to fly, but it's called restricted, which means you can only fly under the glide slope of an aircraft. So as you get closer to the airport, you can fly lower, and as you go further away, you can fly higher. But you have to be very careful you're not getting in the way of any aircraft. And then outside that circle, it's okay to fly.
I think so.
Right? And there's actually an app, which I'll show you next. I did this on the way over here today. you can see, it was an app the FAA put out called Before You Fly. It's the letter B, the number 4, the letter U, and then fly. So if you have this app, even if you're a recreational flyer, if you get this app, it's free, an iOS app or an Android app. You can put in the location or just say, tell me where I am, right where my current location. And if you see these circles around here, it tells you that like for instance, that little blue dot, we're in the middle of a bunch of no-fly zones. So, and it could be heliports, it could be a small airport, it could be a tower-controlled airport, it could be a major Air Force base, and there's different rules for each of those actually. So it's 5 miles from like Hartsfield or Dobbins, it's 3 miles from a smaller airport, it's 1.5 miles from heliports, and all those rules are on the FAA site. And you can see those little circles here. Those are telling you what kind of an airport it is. And then what you're supposed to do if you're going to fly in an area where there's an airport, like a small airport like Hilton Head, you call the people in charge there and you tell them that you want to fly in the area. And most of the time they say it's okay as long as you're not in the actual landing path of the airport. You know, if I'm 2.5 miles away from the airport on the beach, it's probably going to be okay if I fly there as long as they know that I'm there and they can tell the pilots that I'm going to be there. But when I'm flying commercially, I have to actually call a certain phone number 24 hours in advance and tell the FAA where I'm going to be flying, what I'm going to be flying with, how long I'm going to be there, what kind of work I'm going to be doing, and things like that. And they can put a notification. It's called a NOTAM, notification to airmen, and they put a notification out. So if a pilot's supposed to check this list of information about where people are doing different activities when they fly, so they know that if they're flying over the area where I'm going to be, and I'm going to be a couple hundred feet up and they're in a helicopter, they know that they shouldn't be flying, or be aware where I am and fly around it or something like that. You also can't fly, by the way, in national parks. Any national park in the U.S. is forbidden to fly unmanned aircraft. And then there's also these areas called, there's temporary no-fly zones and there's permanent no-fly zones, like Washington, D.C., and areas around certain infrastructure, like power company, nuclear power plants. I mean, so you just have to kind of know where you are when you're going to be flying around. That's why the FAA is so nervous about this stuff. Privacy, that's the next thing. Folks have asked me, is it if I fly up in my yard and I go over the boundaries of my yard, into the next, up in the air, kind of like a helicopter, is that legal or not legal, right? And so Georgia just passed a rule that said, law that said that if you're flying over somebody's property and they don't like the way you're flying, or if you're flying too low or whatever, they can sue you for that now. So it's also now a misdemeanor in Georgia to fly near or around an accident, a fire, or some other emergency situation. You can actually get charged with a misdemeanor for doing that. That law came out about a week ago. And there's some other things about search and rescue and other. I don't remember all the rules, but Georgia actually has a bill now that passed the House, and now it's going to the Senate to see what they're going to do with it. But the thing I usually say about what I heard somebody else say about the privacy thing, it's kind of like if you are standing near your neighbor's yard and you get a really tall ladder and you stand up on the ladder and you look into your neighbor's yard, it's called the jumping the fence rule. It's kind of like if I'm in a position where I could jump over the fence and get into somebody's yard and be in their face, then you're invading their privacy. So that's what I use as a rule. So I fly near my house, near a car dealer, and and there's an empty field there, and I've asked the car dealer if it's okay if I fly over there, and I get approval to fly there because it's kind of close to the car dealer, but not over the car dealer. But I don't want them to be thinking that I'm like spying on them or whatever, It's that kind of thing. So you just have to think about if you were there and all of a sudden something's flying over your head, and you probably heard stories about people shooting them down and things like that, which is also illegal. You're actually not allowed to shoot down an aircraft. You can imagine that's probably makes sense.
You get approval from someone to do that, like a park or a city or something. Is that in writing and you carry it with you?
No. I just call the local authorities in the area, in the park, or I ask a policeman or a sheriff, or I do. Sometimes I write it down. I said, I talked to Mike at the department under the state, and he said it was okay for me to fly because I fly in Cumming. There's a mountain up there called Sawney Mountain Preserve, and I've flown off of that mountain before and asked permission to do that. And so I'm just cognizant of just asking before I fly, you know, but.
So no one's asked you to prove it?
Huh?
No one stopped you and said, you know, you don't have to.
Well, yeah, there's no, it's not like a proof, it's just like there's no really rules. I mean, so I call the park department, I says, oh, if I fly in this park, and they say, yeah, we don't have any rules for that, it's fine, you know, so I just feel more comfortable doing that than just going there, not knowing whether I can or not, you know, so.
What he's asking is,
Yeah.
has no one approached you while you're doing this?
No.
saying, do you have authorization?
No, I've never had that. I never had that happen before. Matter of fact, more people are more. It's almost the opposite. There's no curiosity, folks, and and that's why you need that visual observer, because kids and things will run over and they want to play. You know, they want to touch it, and the props are going around. You know, it can be kind of spooky. You know, so just got to be aware of your surroundings and things like that. I mean, you know, the Millennium Falcon, which is, you know, weighs almost nothing and it's all made of foam. I mean, you can't really do much hurt with that kind of a thing. But this one, I mean, it's flying along. It's 3 pounds, and with the props going, you could hurt somebody with those props if you don't have the prop protectors on them. Okay, aircraft. Lots of different kinds. You can buy them for $30 at Brookstone. You can buy them for $30,000 to do crop dusting across fields in Japan. Japan has been using drones for 20 years doing agricultural work over there. So the one on the top left is the first one I bought, $100 one with the camera actually, and I use that to learn how to fly with. And so I would recommend you get the controls are the same, almost exactly the same on the toy ones as they are on the professional ones. And so you can learn how to fly these things. And actually, they're kind of harder to fly than this because this one has GPS and it kind of stabilizes itself. The little ones are like all over the place. So you get the feel for the controls and things like that. The one on the bottom is the one I have two of the Phantoms. One's what I call Phantom 3 Advanced, and one's got Phantom 3 Pro. Just the difference is the camera. This has a 4K camera. The other one has a 1080 camera. And the one on the top right is actually a company that makes a drone that will follow you around. And actually, I think this company is kind of sort of in trouble. The sales haven't been as probably good as they wanted to. But basically, this drone, you kind of just throw it up in the air, and you wear like a big watch thing on your wrist, and it'll follow you along. You know, and you can be on your bike or in a kayak or running or whatever on a horse, and it'll just follow you around. And it can do some certain tricks like flying around you and things like that. And actually, this drone now will allow you to follow you along on it.
Can you change cameras? Can you change cameras on there?
Not on this one. No, this one just comes with a fixed camera. The more expensive ones than this you can do that. You can put better cameras on them, right? And I mean, there's some big drones that you can put actual real camera, you know, real physical cameras on them. But this one is a 4K camera and does like 14 megapixel, and you can do raw pictures with it and everything. So it's a pretty good device. Aircraft. This is the one that a lot of folks are using. The guy I know who does work for Sony and Paramount has two of these. They're called Inspire. You can put fancy cameras, very fancy cameras on it. This one you can fly with 2 controllers. One person can fly the aircraft while the other person is doing the video. The landing gear, once it takes off, the landing gear get out of the way, so the camera's totally, you know, by itself underneath. So you can do you don't have to worry about where the legs, getting pictures of the legs and things like that. And these start like around 4,000 up to 7,500, depending on the camera you buy with it. I mean, there's lots of other brands. This happens to be just a DJI brand. And you probably can't read that, but these are some of the specs on it. And I'm going to learn more in the learning mode on the photography side than the drone side. But you know, you can change the shutter speed, and then this one as well, and it has, you know, various resolutions. That one does 16 megapixel, and we'll do all the way up to, I guess, 4K as well. And that aircraft will also do burst mode photography, and you can also, I'm trying to think what the other mode was. You can do time photography and things like that. Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to show you now is just how this thing flies, and then when we're done with this, if there's any more questions about things, we can answer those, and then we can get a little stick time on this thing. So the way these aircraft work is there's 2 controls. And there's an app. I mean, I fly with a mobile app that you can see where you're going with the app. But the controls are on the left-hand side. It's a control that allow you to increase and decrease altitude. So the little controller on the left, you press it forward, it goes up. You pull it back, you go down. Right? When you press that same control to the left or the right, it actually turns the aircraft around. I think it's called yaw. So it can point the aircraft, and it still stays where it is. It just turns the direction of where the front is. Right. You can go all the way around either way by going left and right. So you can turn it around. So in this case, with this camera, that makes the camera face whatever direction you want the camera to face, because the camera doesn't turn around inside the landing gear. It just stays where I can move it up and down. I can on the gimbal, which is a 3-axis gimbal, so which keeps it level. I can point the camera down or up, but I can't. I think it only turns a little bit left and right. You just turn the aircraft around to point it where you want to go for this kind of a aircraft. And then on the right-hand side is the one that makes the aircraft move. So it moves, forward and back is forward and back, and then it also moves left and right. It has the 4 props on it, and actually 2 of the props run in clockwise direction, and the other 2 run counterclockwise. Right. So, actually, the pitch it may run in the same direction, but the pitch is no. I was correct. Yeah, they run the opposite way. Which is what keeps it stable. Right. So 2 of them they're like counteracting each other, and that's how they can keep counter-rotate. Yeah, how they can keep it in one place. And the actual props are bent in different directions depending on whether it's which one they're on. And these are color coded, so you know which props to put on which place. There's gray ones and there's black ones, and the props are color coded as well. So and they self-tighten. So when you put them on, it's turning in that direction, so the prop will never fall off. Because if anything, it'll get tighter, as it spins, type of thing. And that's pretty much it as far as the general overview. What kind of things can I answer about the business or the regulations or any kind of stuff? Yeah.
I'm more interested in it seems like it's still a little bit of the Wild West with rules and regulations. And I mean, you're a considerate person to ask, hey, can I fly in this park? But and everybody should be to a certain degree because of privacy and safety and some of the things you said. But
right.
If you're a photographer and you just want to go grab a shot on the Chattahoochee, somebody's going to go out there and do it. In fact, I know a bunch of people that they go and do it. But the question is that as this, like any new technology, becomes standardized in all of our businesses, and it seems like everybody has different businesses and different uses for it, but where kind of exactly, aside of asking permission, and being cognizant of others and going into it, like what are the real rules right now where we stand? It seems like it's still kind of very gray, and we'll get to you with some kind of really firm FAA thing coming out this year or next year. And I asked that because I used that in my business, was more entertainment and over festivals and things like that. And a lot of people, we use them all the time, and they're great, and they're really good tools. And of course, the companies and the people we use, they have mega insurance, and they're very careful, and they have 1,000 hours and stuff like that. But you seem very knowledgeable about the rules. Like, for example, you have to have a pilot's license. What kind of license are you talking about? A Cessna or a big plane? Or like, where are we at with the rules? Really, like if we go out and fly and someone walks up to me and say, hey, Andy and Larry, cut it out, here's a ticket, like where are we at?
Well, the FAA, I know 2 of the FAA guys that work in the southern region. One is Mike Wilson. He specifically just does UAS stuff, goes all over the country actually talking about similar things that I'm talking about here. The other guy's more of a local fellow, and every time I talk to them about this particular topic that you're asking about, they say right now they're what they call the education mode. So they're telling people that there are regulations. Like I said, there's this exemption you need to fly for commercial purposes and so forth and so on. And if you go to the FAA site, there is a proposed rule document that was already written at the beginning of last year, and you can read through that, and it tells you what the potential rules will be. I think they're working on modifying that till they're completely finished with it and getting approved. But there was a proposed rule that was put out last year. As a matter of fact, when I started this whole thing in June of last year, I was told that the rules would be done by October of last year, and that you wouldn't have to be a pilot then, right? And so I said, oh, good, I'll get this whole thing together. I'll get my exemption by the time the October comes on. I'll be able to fly, right? Well, they didn't make their deadline, the FAA. The U.S. Congress beat them all up and said, this is industry's going to make a lot of money for us, and I mean, for everybody, and we need to get these rules so more people can fly, not just pilots. And so the FAA said, okay, well, we'll get it done sometime in 2016. And then when they got it really nailed down, they said, we hope we'll get it done by June. So like I said, I'm not sure that's when they're going to actually finalize this thing, but the proposed rules are out there, and the current rules are, yes, you have to be a pilot, and those are very specific. I mean, I have a 30, I think that the FAA ruling that I got was, let's see, I'm getting confused between two documents. But I think it's about 40 pages of documents altogether, that the FAA approval for fly exempt, and then there's something called a blanket COA, and COA is Certificate of Authorization or Certificate of Aircraft, I forget the exact initials, but basically what it means is that if you get this exemption, you don't have to, let me take it back a step. Before you had this exemption, every single aircraft that you wanted to fly had to have a special authorization to fly in the national airspace. Because regular aircraft, Boeing and Grumman, they all go through all these procedures with the FAA to be approved safe aircraft. These aircraft don't go through the same process. And so people would have to take whatever aircraft they had, either when they made themselves or they bought it commercially, and get the COA to be able to fly that aircraft. And if they got a different aircraft, they'd have to go through the process all over again.
Yeah, it's a certificate of airworthiness.
Of airworthiness, right. So, but now with this exemption for unmanned aircraft, they give you what they call a blanket COA, which means you can fly pretty much any, as long as you specify what it is. You can, like I had to specify I'm flying DJI Phantom aircraft. I don't have to go through that whole COA process, which would have been a whole nother bureaucracy thing to go through for every single aircraft that you wanted to fly. You'd have to go through that whole COA thing. So they eliminated that, but they haven't eliminated the fact that you have to be a pilot now, and all these other rules about where you can fly and when you can fly and how you report, 24 hours in advance, how you report where you're going to fly and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure I answered the whole question, but yeah, it is still up in the air. No pun intended.
I think it's still loose. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I know people who do it professionally for a living, and then I know people who are hobbyists who just like getting good shots in good areas.
Yeah, and
it's
recreational,
always-
yeah, and
It's always
recreation.
been the question of, should I ask somebody? If I do, who should I ask? And, it's
Yeah.
like, what do we do with this thing? And I think it's honestly, I think it's the opinion, I think that the technology and consumerism with it got a little ahead of
Oh, way ahead.
regulations.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of caught the FAA with their pants down. So it's
Yeah.
like, well, wow, these people fly these things everywhere. We should standardize this. So I think
Yeah.
that's kind of where we are. But it sounds like,
Yeah.
you know.
It's still in that process. The FAA totally admits that the technology is way ahead of them, and their stance on that. Matter of fact, the fellow from the FAA told me in a meeting. He said the FAA stance is, yes, we're slow. No, we don't do beta rules. We only do rules that we actually totally figure out what the rules are, and then we implement them. He said, so we don't do like half a rule and then So he said, yeah, it takes more time. It takes us time to do that because we want to make sure we get it right the first time. And we make the rule. That's the rule. So he said
It has to
that's
be foolproof.
yeah.
It can't confuse people and get changed.
Right.
So
And
dynamic as it is.
Right, and so yeah.
I guess the next question from
yeah,
that is
right.
be like, where do you think it's going? Because, okay, let's say, someone here liked it, hey, I'm gonna go spend $5,000 on a drone. Where do I register the vehicle? Where do I register myself as a pilot? Who do I call? There's gotta be a protocol and.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Other than me just jumping in the car and saying, I'm gonna go get the shots I want, Which is
Yeah,
not the right thing, but-
and the place to start is FAA.gov/UAS. I mean, that's where all the rules are, that's where all the documents are, that's where the application is, and that's where you find out about the Before You Fly app and all of that, right? And so that's the main place, because they're the ones that are end result in charge of airspace, and so that's kind of what that is. Anything else?
Can
Yeah.
we have the rest of the questions after we stop broadcasting? But I
Yeah.
wanted to go ahead and kind
Right.
of wrap things
Okay.
up. Thank
Yeah.
you, Larry.
You're welcome.
You did a great presentation. A couple of announcements I wanted to make. I want everyone to big round of applause for Robbie and Michelle here at Van Gogh Video Studio. Let us use these wonderful facilities, and I will have the video out for everybody. And I also wanted to recognize, I asked, in all my hectic getting ready for everything, I had asked Charles Kelly from Perfect Image Printing to be here. And they do beautiful brochures. They're very reasonably priced. And I don't know, how many of you do brochures for your company, marketing brochures? Anybody? No? Well, I think it's a good idea. I went with 8 years of my company not doing them, and I always thought I should have had some kind of leave behind, because sure enough, I'd run into a client and they were like, I didn't know you did that. I just knew you did this. So anyway, Perfect Image Printing is really good. They do a great job, really high quality paper that makes your brand look really good. So I should have recognized them at the beginning. And just thanks again for everything.